I know that Dragon Age Veilguard just released yesterday, and if you are playing it, I hope you are enjoying it, but we actually got some Mass Effect 5 news. On Twitter, Gamble was replying to some different people who had concerns about Dragon Age. Someone says, please don't Pixar Mass Effect like you guys did with Dragon Age. And he says, I'm not sure I agree with the Pixar thing, but Mass Effect is photorealistic and will be as long as I'm running it. He also took to his own Twitter and said, lots of people asking me about Mass Effect now that Veilguard reviews are out, and October 31st is close. Both of them are from the same studio, but Mass Effect is Mass Effect. How you bring a sci-fi RPG to life is different than other genres or IPs, and has to have different kinds of love. Regarding tone questions, Mass Effect will maintain the mature tone of the original trilogy. This is all I'm gonna say for now. And if you watched my Andromeda review where I kind of talk about what I did and didn't like, my main issue with Andromeda is I didn't like that it had a younger tone. Ryder felt very young, and PB also felt really young for an Asari as well. There was something about the entire game that just had a more lighthearted tone. I'm in my mid-30s. I don't really like reading young adult books anymore. I don't really like watching shows with young protagonists. And that was my main issue with Andromeda. It felt like it was made for a younger audience. And I just found that really disconnected with the original trilogy, because to me, after the original trilogy, it felt like anything following the original trilogy should have aged with the fandom. When Andromeda came out, it was 10 years after Mass Effect 1, and it was 5 years after Mass Effect 3. The fans have gotten older. And it didn't really feel like Andromeda was made for the fans who had been there, who had gotten older. And maybe that's a hot take, maybe people won't agree with me, but that is how I felt with the tone of the game, with the difference in protagonist and the story, and the companions. And while I love Dragon Age Veilguard, part of my criticism was that Dragon Age as a whole seems to reinvent itself every iteration, and seems to try to appeal to a brand new fan base alongside its original fan base. And yes, that's how games should work. They do have to bring in a new fan base. That's how you keep something alive. But I just feel like with Andromeda, that's what it felt like. The switch from the original trilogy to Andromeda felt like the way each Dragon Age game is new. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing. While I know people love Dragon Age Origins, Inquisition is the game that the most people have played. It won Game of the Year, and it sold the most copies. So for Dragon Age, change can be good, but I also think it's risky. And with Andromeda, I don't think that change really paid off. I don't think it's what fans were expecting, and I think that Bioware kind of knows, especially Mike Gamble, knows that Mass Effect 5 not only has to bring in a new fan base, but also capture the original fan base who may have been turned off by Andromeda. Again, that's not saying that everybody was turned off by Andromeda, but I think a lot of people lost interest in Mass Effect if that was how the series was going to continue going. So I do think that Mike Gamble is very aware of that, and he's not going to abandon Andromeda. He was a producer on it. But I also just feel like he knows that people want the original trilogy back, even if it's not Shepard. So while I don't love that he said this in response to someone criticizing Veilguard, I am happy that he did confirm it. I honestly expected it anyways. I think that Gamble is extremely tuned in to what the fan base wants. He hasn't been subtle about listening to criticism and hearing fans out over on Twitter. So I do feel like he knows and has a good grasp of what the fans want. And I'm going to be totally honest. I think what fans want is more of the original trilogy. Not necessarily Shepard, but the more linear approach, the more mature tone, and the Milky Way galaxy, which we know we are returning to. We know there's Andromeda that is going to be included, but how we don't exactly know yet. But majority of what we've seen so far is from the original trilogy locations. It's from the Milky Way galaxy. And yes, I know there's an Angara in the picture that was released last N7 day, but that could very well and does look like it's from the Milky Way galaxy. There's a whole conversation about how the Angara may have been in other galaxies, and I think that's what they're bringing in. But I don't think we're going back to the Andromeda galaxy. That is pure speculation though. Luckily, we're going to find out more in just 6 days. And we've already got Mike Gamble talking about Mass Effect 5 already. So I think things are looking good. And if you are worried about how Dragon Age Veilguard is doing, yesterday it actually launched as EA's biggest ever single-player game on Steam, which is kind of a big deal. There was a top concurrent players of about 70,000 players, where previously it was Jedi Survivor, which managed about 67,000. So yeah, it's looking pretty good for Veilguard right now, and they did say in their earnings report they were expecting good things. So I do think we can kind of safely, hopefully say that Mass Effect 5 is gonna happen, and will hopefully move into actual production sometime soon. Having played Veilguard, I do think that there's always room for more Dragon Age, but I definitely think the team wants to move to Mass Effect. I think that Mass Effect has always been the larger franchise, and I do think it has the wider audience. I also think that Dragon Age Veilguard's release is a good thing for Bioware because they can get a lot of feedback. Veilguard's release will essentially be a lesson for Bioware. I also don't say that as a bad thing. I'm not saying that Veilguard does bad, so EA needs to know exactly what not to do. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think that some of the feedback for Veilguard has probably been beneficial for the studio. After Veilguard being entirely offline, having no microtransactions, not requiring the EA app, and Veilguard not requiring a DRM such as de novo, is a pretty big deal. These are all good moves in the right direction from a studio and publisher that aren't really necessarily trusted. And EA is obviously very aware of how important these are. So alongside the good criticism that they're getting for these moves, it's very clear based on Gamble's tweet that there is other criticisms that are negative surrounding Veilguard. So I'm sure Gamble and his team are taking all of that into consideration, especially with how they will approach Mass Effect 5. The reception to Veilguard is probably going to influence a lot of things that we experience in the next Mass Effect, and I cannot wait to learn more in 6 days. For N7 Day, I will be doing a stream, though it will probably be shorter, and it's probably just gonna be me. We'll see how I feel and see how long I can go for, but I definitely still want to do something for N7 Day since I think we're probably gonna get something small. Anyways, thank you for watching, and let me know what you think about everything that Gamble said and Mass Effect 5 sticking to photorealism. Thank you to my channel members and thank you to my Patreon members. I'll see you all for N7 Day.